Did you notice that this show doesn't have any commercials? I'm not selling you diapers or vitamins or smoothies or gasoline. That's because I don't want corporate sponsors telling us what to investigate and what to say. Instead, you're our sponsors. This is a production by our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network. If you want more investigations, more hard-hitting news, if you want the truth, go to ICanDecide.org and donate now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there in this beautiful world. Welcome to the Highwire. Well, it's been an outrageous week, and I think we're all starting to recognize that we're almost there, folks. We've almost reached complete herd stupidity. And what I mean is a total destruction of the world as we know it, based on the fact that we are no longer free to speak. Here in the United States of America, of course, our First Amendment rights are under siege. That's okay, though. I mean, I'm going to talk about that for just a second. But if you think about it, you know, the demise or the fall of every empire happens right about the point where they start trying to shut everybody up. When they shut down the news, and when they shut down the reporters, when they shut down the people, you know, when they start burning books, that's about the time you can recognize that they are in their dying days. So the truth is alive and well. But as you all know, many of us have been kicked off of Twitter and kicked off of Facebook and YouTube. And so there was a huge migration taking place to what was a new platform just recently, Parler. Well, then all of a sudden, when everybody was gathering on Parler just last week, Parler was deplatformed, which was crazy because we all thought Parler was a platform. It was actually brought down by Amazon and Apple. They said you won't be able to have your apps in our app stores, and then essentially, as I understand it, their own websites came down. I'm sure they're looking to rebuild this. And get back into the game. But it's pretty scary when you think about it. I mean, what are we talking about? How is it that there's only one voice that's going to be allowed? I mean, this really does smack of those dystopian novels that had ideas like the Ministry of Truth. I mean, when we think about Twitter or Facebook, these were supposed to be interactive software, like a way for us to speak to each other across the world without having to pay for a phone call. Are we just this close to our phone calls being listened to and someone entering in and saying, "I'm sorry, that's against AT&T's community guidelines. You're going to have to stop speaking to each other"? Now, one of the issues that I want to bring up is a lot of the discussions about the fact that it's political speak, that it's really, about conservative versus Republican views, conservative versus liberal views. But really, our show, The Highwire, we're not political. I've never chosen a candidate. I don't get involved in that. We talk about, the issue of medical freedom and how different candidates are handling it. But like everything else on The Highwire, I'm going to leave you to your own conclusions and to make your own decisions so that we stay in line with our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network. You consent to your own ideas. But when we look at all of this censorship, it hasn't just been political. We've seen doctors like, Josh Axe. You know that we lost our channel, but Josh Axe went down. We know the film Plandemic, that was simply about this pandemic, got taken down. And much of this started for us 2 years ago. In fact, we're kind of used to this. 2 years ago, it was Adam Schiff that wrote Amazon and said any of the information or sites that are questioning the safety of vaccines should be brought down. This is what happened. Amazon kicked my film Vaxxed off of our Amazon Prime member deal, which meant that everyone was supposed to be able to see that movie for free till the end of time. And then eventually we lost our YouTube and our Facebook. And that may be why this week we are, I guess, in some ways better set up than most in that our website's been fortified. We've got this brilliant player. I think you've been getting used to it working better and better. We're really excited about that. All of that made possible, of course, by your sponsorship. But we got pounded this week. While Parler was shutting down, we were reaching nearly 500,000 hits to our website per day. So you know we're here. We're excited that everyone is getting used to sort of that old school approach, which is it doesn't just show up on your computer naturally because there's some algorithm allowing you to just, eat popcorn and stare, blindly into space. You actually have to type www.thehighwire.com. No one thought you would do it, but you figured it out. Anyway, I'm kidding. We have a very intelligent audience, but I do want to take this moment to really let you all know that we have got to actively stand up against this. And the way that we have to do that is I want you to think about the places where you do go for your information, whether it's the Highwire or other, blogs or podcasts that are out there. You really need to make a concerted effort today to sign up to their newsletters. And especially since you're here watching us right now, sign up to our newsletter because think about it. If Parler can lose its website, so could we at some point. We'll always figure out a way to do it. But go to thehighwire.com and simply put in your email. It's going to a completely protected server where we keep all that information. But imagine there may be a moment, maybe it's a short blackout time or maybe it's long term, where we will only be able to email you our breaking news or our show. I hope that that never happens, but please give us the opportunity and show these people they're never going to get away with it, that we are actually going to take the extra step to engage ourselves with each other. We're going to sign up to the newsletters that we care about so that all of those that are doing great work and really doing these investigations in all the different areas, of course, we're very focused on medical freedom, but maybe it's banking or maybe it's the military industrial complex, whatever you're focused on, wherever you're getting your information, please make that extra effort today and get on the newsletters so that no one can ever stop us, so they cannot quiet us, so they can't shut us down. That is how the people will take us through this last desperate effort for the small minds attempting to take over the world. We're going to thwart them in that. Let's do that together. And just so you know, we keep picking up more platforms. Let's bring up this right now. I just want to show you that the Highwire, those are all of the places now that you can see us. I just signed up with Gab. I have some real hope that Gab might be a great site that's coming up. Of course, they tried to launch about a year ago, but got stopped by the FBI. But one of the easiest ways to always find where we're at is go to Linktree /the Highwire. Remember, there's a dot right after the TR, but Linktree /the Highwire, so you can always figure out all of the platforms we're on, and you can go ahead and share that with your friends around the world. I have a huge, huge show coming up. There's a lot to talk about, tons of breaking news, all of it proving that we have been really on the pulse of COVID and this vaccine for about 9 months now. Those of you that are joining us on the Highwire for the first time, if you really like what you see here, go back and check out our archive because it's pretty astounding how accurate we've been on many of these things, and I got some great news coming up. I'm going to be talking to Dr. James Neuenschwander, who has spent his life focused on vaccine injury, and we're going to look at some of the specific injuries that may be happening from the COVID-19 vaccine. I've got a breaking perspective on the vaccine and how it might be affecting the brain. We're going to talk to neuroscientist from the University of British Columbia, Dr. Chris Shaw. And man, I'm really excited to get a chance to talk to Sir Desmond Sweeney. He has been just ripping it up in the Parliament in the UK, and now I get a chance to have a little conversation with him. But first, it's time for the Jackson Report. All right, Jeffrey, so what do we got going on this week?
Hey, Del. Well, we've covered Andrew Cuomo quite a bit, the governor of New York, but we're seeing a very different Andrew Cuomo as of late, and he went to a press briefing, and it sounded like this. Take a look.
All right.
We simply cannot stay closed until the vaccine hits critical mass. The cost is too high. We will have nothing left to open. We must reopen the economy, but we must do it smartly and safely.
Boy, does that sound familiar? That sounds like perhaps we cannot have the cure be worse than the disease. We've got to open safely. Isn't that what the Great Barrington Declaration has been saying from the beginning? That we cannot hide from this virus. We need to protect those that are high risk and let the rest of the people get back to work before we destroy the nation that we live in. One of the greatest, or I think the greatest nation, one of the greatest economies the world has ever seen. Sounds like Cuomo is really having a change of heart. But my question, Jeffrey, is where's this coming from? Is this because, is there, has the infection rate gone down? Do they think they've won this thing in New York? What's giving them confidence to make this statement?
Yeah, well, it's anybody's guess, but let's take a look at some of the graphs coming out of New York,
Okay.
and this daily new cases. So this was one of the graphs that caused a lot of alarm and some of the information that caused the lockdowns. And you can see the cases are spiking, but the mortality rate is way down from
Yeah.
the initial peaks in March when this thing was spreading. So it's certainly, by Andrew Cuomo's standards, this would be a lockdown imperative with these cases spiking like this. But there may be another reason. People have been leaving New York. The economy there has not been doing too well because people have been getting out of there just to get rid of the lockdowns, or just plain tired of Cuomo. So this is Fast Company. It says, stay in Texas, fleeing New York. Here's how and where people are moving to during COVID-19. And real quick, they did a study. This just came out. They looked from January to December 15th, so basically all of last year. And they found that about 25% of the people, of all people moving in New York, were leaving. So only 75% were staying in the state. So
Well, you're
pretty
telling
big.
me they have had a 25% reduction in population in New York over this last year?
Yeah, that most people, it says in the study, stay when they move. About 85% of people move into the same state, so they just move someplace different.
Don't those
In New
people realize that he won awards for the great work he did? I mean, remember the Emmy Award? I mean, he won an Emmy Award, I think, for what was it, Best PowerPoint? Oh, there it is. Cuomo wins Emmy for his COVID-19 briefings. Says he shares honor with New Yorkers and journalists. I guess they didn't care that they'd won an award about the great report. And what I find shocking about when we've been watching Andrew Cuomo, of course, he had this massive death rate in nursing homes. So many people died. And I think you could argue New York, certainly at the top of the pandemic, had the highest death rate, or one of the highest death rates in the entire world. So how he's ever won any awards is shocking. But certainly, if you've lost 1/4 of your population, I would guess at a certain point you don't want to go down as the guy that destroyed the leading economy maybe in the world, New York City. I mean, that drives all of our banking. Can you imagine just it being rubble and saying, that's sorry about that? Man,
Well,
that's got to be stressful.
yeah, perhaps he's reading the New York Post. He's waiting for the vaccine. He says we can't wait for the vaccine to kick in
Yeah.
because we'll have no economy left and no one will be left. So New York Post reports Moderna boss, this is the Moderna vaccine, says COVID-19 vaccine not proven to stop spread of the virus. So maybe he's
Wow.
getting wind that this thing may not be all it's cracked up to be. That's Tal Zaks. He's the chief medical officer. And then just recently, Moderna's CEO, that's Stefan Bancel, he says that we'll have to live with COVID forever. This was at a teleconference. He said we're going to have to live with it forever, we think, and it's not going away. So perhaps
Man.
almost seeing these headlines going, wait a minute, what are we waiting for? Why are we waiting for this vaccine to get out there? Let's open up this economy.
There's some I told you so's I don't really feel very good about, but this one kind of feels good. Andrew, if you'd have just been watching the Highwire for the last, 8 or 9 months, we had to jump on this. We told you, you're not going to be able to hide from this virus, and no matter what you do, obviously it's still spiking in New York, so your draconian measures don't work, and that vaccine unicorn you've been waiting for obviously isn't going to arrive to save you. I wonder if he's, if he's getting angry. I think the big question too, Jeffrey, is this a signal to the Biden administration that may be coming in? Is this a signal to the Democratic Party that, look, we're not going to survive this. We cannot destroy our economies. This isn't going to work. Or, I guess the other question is, was this always the plan? Right, was always the plan to just, use this as an election device, and then as soon as we take over the White House and the Congress and the Senate, why don't we go ahead and do what, Donald Trump actually was saying the whole time, which is we've got to open. He kept saying, the cure can't be worse than the disease. There's ways to open. He was listening to the scientists from the Great Barrington Declaration. I wonder if maybe this means we won't lock down once the Biden administration comes in. I mean, I think all of these are the questions that this brings up. Or is there some infighting going on now inside the party? But clearly, waiting for a vaccine is stupid because it doesn't stop infection. And waiting till all of your jobs are destroyed is stupid because you're never going to get reelected. So many interesting developments happening as we speak right now. Amazing.
Absolutely. And while we're on the subject of the vaccine not stopping transmission and talking immunity, we have a new study, and what does help immunity, turns out, is natural immunity, and it's it's certainly a good thing. This is out of Gizmodo. Good news: natural immunity to the coronavirus may last years. Studies suggest, and we reported on this way back when about the possibility of this. But this is a study. Now, that's the headline. Let's go beyond that. Let's actually look at the study. This is a study. It's titled "Immunological Memory to SARS-CoV-2 Assessed for Up to 8 Months After Infection." This was published in the journal Science. And it says, in the current study, we assess immune memory of all three branches of adaptive immunity: CD4 T cell, CD8 T cell, and humoral immunity, in a predominantly cross-sectional study of 188 recovered COVID-19 cases extending up to 8 months post-infection. The findings have implications for immunity against secondary COVID-19 and thus the potential future course of the pandemic. What did they find? They found IgG, now these are the antibodies, to the spike protein was relatively stable over 6+ months. Spike-specific memory B cells were more abundant at 6 months than at 1 month post-symptom onset. SARS-CoV-2 specific CD4 T cells and CD8 T cells declined with a half-life of 3 to 5 months. And then finally, it says the percentage of subjects seropositive for SARS-CoV-2 neutralizing antibody titer is greater than or equal to 20 at 6 to 8 months post-symptom onset.
Wow.
PSO was 90%. So here we have a pretty, I guess this would be what Fauci calls a robust immune response from natural immunity.
And really, this should put the death nail into that discussion. Well, we're not sure that there's long-term immunity like every other disease you ever caught your entire life, or illness or cold or flu or anything else. This may be a different type of virus, but now we're recognizing that that's not true. And it's been very problematic, right? It's sort of been on again, off again. It's saying, well, there's no long-term immunity. But then they realized, but then that would mean the vaccine wouldn't work. So maybe there is. But now we're really getting down to the truth, right? While Pfizer and Moderna are admitting that they don't believe that the vaccine, or they have no proof that the vaccine stops the infection or stops transmission. The WHO has backed that up, saying that there's no proof the vaccine does that. What we're seeing is this study saying that actually catching the illness does do that for at least 8 months. And 8 months is as long as we've had to look at it, right? What they're saying is, for the extent and the time that this virus has been around, those that are catching it are not being reinfected and seem to be holding on to strong immunity. It's great news.
Yep. Pretty much for the entire length of that study, which was 8 months. And some people will say, well, that's only 188 people. Well, New England Journal of Medicine, late December, published this. This was from Oxford University hospitals in the United Kingdom. It's titled "Antibody Status and Incidence of SARS-CoV-2 Infection in Healthcare Workers." So it looked at over 12,000 healthcare workers. And what did it find? It said the presence of anti-spike antibodies was associated with a substantially reduced risk of PCR-confirmed SARS-CoV-2 infection over 31 weeks of follow-up. No symptomatic infections and only 2 PCR-positive results in asymptomatic healthcare workers were seen in those with anti-spike antibodies, which suggests that previous infection resulting in antibodies to SARS-CoV-2 is associated with protection from reinfection for most people for at least 6 months. And again, that's the duration of this study. So this is really interesting. But now let's compare that data to what we know about the vaccine. So the corporate media is even discussing this now. This is something that's been forced into the discussion. So Bloomberg is reporting on this, and their title looks like this: how a COVID-19 vaccine could end up helping the virus spread. It may be possible to infect others even after getting the shot. Now, it goes on to say a vaccine that protects against symptoms of COVID-19 could contribute to the spread of the disease if, and this is still just an if, the people who get vaccinated remain capable of carrying and transmitting the disease. It goes on to say, we don't know for sure if immunized people are capable of shedding infectious virus. It It also says it's also not yet clear how much protection the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and others would provide.
I mean,
Holy
this
cow.
thing is such a disaster, Jeffrey. Just last week, we were talking about how the effectiveness of this vaccine, when it was looked at by the editor of the, was it British Medical Journal, Peter Doshi, and he said that, look, there were thousands of cases of infection in the vaccinated group that they didn't even test in the middle of their trial. So they obviously tried to hide or fake the data, say that they even had 95% efficacy against symptoms. And I want to keep reminding people, because everywhere I go, they say, well, it's 95% effective for somebody. It's not effective at stopping the illness. It's not effective at stopping transmission. It's only supposed to be effective at stopping symptoms. But as we pointed out last week, if you take the thousands of people that got infected after having the vaccine in the trial and put them in there, you realize that there's almost no difference. It was something like 19% maybe better, which is far below the 50% that was being requested. So I just think this thing is such a turkey. We've been saying it all along that it will, I guessed from the very beginning that the vaccine unicorn might turn into something much uglier. And slowly but surely, there is what they started with, and this seems to be what they're ending with. That's even getting worse. So, how long can they keep up this game, right? I mean, that's the question. How long can they keep playing this game when people that have had the illness are now the only ones that can really walk freely around in society? If we're going to start like really asking where people are at, have you had the illness is the only way to know that you're actually safe.
Right. And it's important to remember they haven't released the raw data for anybody to look at. So Peter Doshi, the associate editor of the BMJ, just did a kind of a reanalysis of what was out there in the public sphere. He came up with, I believe, like you said, 19%, maybe tops 26%.
Yeah.
But let's look at the data that the FDA used that was submitted to them by Pfizer for the emergency use authorization. And now that's exactly 1 month to the day since that has started the vaccination program. And here we have unknown benefits and data gaps. Duration of protection. Now remember, natural immunity, 8 months, 6 months plus.
Right.
This says the interim and final analyses have a limited length of follow-up. It is not possible to assess sustained efficacy over a period of longer than 2 months. Then it goes on to say, data under vaccine effectiveness against transmission of SARS-CoV-2, it says data are limited to assess the effect of the vaccine against transmission of SARS-CoV-2 from individuals who are infected despite vaccination. So very interesting. Now, where have we seen this before? Are we seeing people infected although they had the vaccine? Turns out we are. So many headlines to choose from. I just threw this one in there. This was out of Canada. We have coronavirus Canada update. 7 Quebecers test positive for COVID-19 despite first vaccination. And then this one had made the news. A nursing home had 0 coronavirus deaths, and then it vaccinates residents for coronavirus, and the deaths began. Now, there's been a lot of controversy in this article, a lot of fact checkers jumping all over it. Basically, what happened was nursing homes started their vaccination program on December 22nd with the first round, and then January 12th for the second round. The nursing home claims the deaths were from a disease, COVID-19 outbreak there on December 21st, the day before the vaccine.
How convenient. I mean, and these are the things, right? This is what's so troubling and why I have been in this investigation for 4 or 5 years. The amount of excuses, right? The coincidences. Nothing causes coincidence like a vaccine. It's just a coincidence that a nursing home has no infections whatsoever, is squeaky clean, and then the day that they start vaccinating, that must have been the day we all got infected with the coronavirus. It lay dormant, and that's why I think it was like 100 and something people got sick, 24 or 5 died. And I think there's many, many more questions that good scientists should be asking. I don't care what the trolls have to say on the internet. We've got, and they weren't alone, right? I saw so many tweets from doctors, nurses, all saying, got the vaccine. 2 weeks later, I got COVID. Like, it doesn't appear to be working. And so many of those discussions, as we said, the thousands of people that got symptoms were symptomatic after receiving the vaccines in the trials. And so I get that they don't want to admit it. I get that our governments have invested billions, if not hundreds of billions into this product. And I get that there's no liability, so what difference does it make to the industry? But at some point, there's going to be a breaking point where we're going to have to say, hey, man, this thing is a turkey. Meanwhile, the only people that seem healthy and safe are those that, caught the cold a few months ago and they're walking around looking amazing.
Right. And it's still considered, I mean, it's a public health intervention, but it's still considered an experimental
Right.
vaccine. So the people getting this thing are, they're data points for a cohort of post-marketing data for a vaccine. But let's look at another public health measure, masks.
Okay.
So a study just came out. They looked at 50 states with their masks, their mandates. So a comprehensive analysis of 50 states shows greater spread with mask mandates. Yes, you've read that right. This was from a website called Rational Ground. That's kind of a conglomeration and collection of researchers and data crunchers. And let's look at some of the data here. They
Okay.
basically put in an infographic, not to get too deep in it, but you see here from May 1st to December 15th, they looked at 50 states for mask mandates. We calculated, it says, how many cases per day by population with and without masks. What they found, the number 17 was the number of cases per day per 100,000 people for states with no mask mandate in place. That led to 41,959 cases a day with no mandate. With the mask mandate, it was 27 per 100,000 with the mask mandate in place. That was 62,000, a little over 62,000 with the mask mandate in place.
Wow.
So it's about 20,000 more per day. I'm sorry, 20,000 more total with the mask mandate, which is absolutely shocking information. And we've heard Scott Atlas when he was an advisor.
It's not shocking to me, Jeffrey, though, because I've been saying this, right? Nobody taught us how to wear masks. We're not wearing masks the way you do in an OR, where you have somebody else scratching your face so that you don't touch your face. We don't have somebody that says, hey, you just touched your mask, you better throw it out. Did you see this B-roll of this, this politician? Look at this guy right here. This is why these things don't work. Oh, wow. Dude. The entire purpose of wearing that mask was so that that sneeze stays inside of the mask. We've seen footage of Biden do this, even Tony Fauci himself, because it doesn't feel natural to blow all of the excrement out of your nose and face into a cloth that's going to remain on your face. So everybody's doing this, and he's touching it. Then he just touched the handles and the seats. I mean, I want to do an experiment somewhere in the future where we just hand out masks with some sort of, iridescent or glow-in-the-dark material, and then go through the grocery store after everybody wore them. You would see glow finger hand spots all over your fruit, all over your vegetables, all over the machine that you put your credit card in, because we can't stop touching our faces, which means we have got to be spreading this more when we wear masks, even if masks weren't doing anything whatsoever. And then forget about the steam coming out, that we're seeing all of the videos of steam coming out of someone's mask, or when I did the vape pen. I mean, to me, I guess I just had to jump here and say, you said it was shocking. Yeah, maybe shocking to everybody else, but those that are watching the Highwire, amazing.
Yeah,
Cool study, though.
incredible. Yeah, incredible video. That was very funny. Well, the data, the people are claiming that they're following data, but acting contrary to that, as far as our leaders and our health officials when they see this data. But let's drill down deeper and let's talk about kids with masks. If anybody grabs one thing from this segment, please make it be this. There's a study out of Germany. It was a registry, and they looked at kids. This Corona Children's Studies, COCI was the registry. First results of a German-wide registry on mouth and nose covering masks in children. Okay, so what they found on this. On October 20th, 363 doctors were asked to make entries and to make parents and teachers aware of the registry. By the 26th of October, the registry had been used by 20,353 people. In this publication, we report the results from the parents who entered data on a total of 25,930 children.
Wow.
Now, buckle up for this one. Here's the results. The average wearing time of the mask was 275 minutes per day. Impairments caused by wearing the mask were reported by 68% of the parents. These include irritability, 60%, headache, 53%, difficulty concentrating, 50%, less happiness, 49%, reluctance to go to school, kindergarten, 44%, malaise, 42%, impaired learning, 38%, and drowsiness or fatigue, 37%.
Wow.
Now, what I didn't add in here was over half, 56%, had disrupted sleeping patterns. But it says adults need to collectively reflect the circumstances under which they will be willing to take the residual risk upon themselves in favor of enabling children to have a higher quality of life without having to wear a mask. in looking at the research, all the research out there, the authors write, it has been shown that the majority of infected children, especially up to age 10, develop no or only mild symptoms. In rare cases, children up to the age of 10 years develop severe courses of the disease. This we already know. The one child and 2 adolescents who have died from COVID-19 had chronic pre-existing conditions. In Europe, children under 10 years of age rarely seem to be spreaders in this infection process. Um, it also reported in there that children developed new fears. 25% of them did. They were developing anxiety disorders. They were having nightmares of people without facial expressions because of the masks,
Yeah.
and they couldn't identify them. This is, I saw someone write about it. I tried to grab the article before the show, but someone wrote about this and said, this is basically mandated child abuse is what we're
Yeah.
looking at here with this data.
I absolutely agree. And you shouldn't need a study of 30,000 children to tell you that this isn't good for the psyche of children, to not see each other's smiling faces, to be told that the air you're breathing could be dangerous or deadly. It's pure insanity, especially when we know the science has shown from the beginning that this does not affect children. And those scientists, the over 50,000 now that signed on to the Great Barrington Declaration, and Dr. Shukrit Bhakti, and many of the world-renowned scientists that have appeared right on the show all said the same thing. The one thing we know we should be doing for sure is putting these kids back in school. Let them, roll in the dirt, hug each other, be normal, because that is your front line to herd immunity. And but the question has always been like, how does it affect the teachers, right? I mean, isn't that, well, the kids may be okay, but what about the teachers? I guess,
Right.
So.
Yeah, and there's been some studies on that. I grabbed a few here, and
Okay.
we'll just wrap this up by looking at the school infection rate. So early on in Ireland, we reported on this. This was in May. There was a study of children, school children in Ireland, and it says no evidence of secondary transmission of COVID-19 from children attending school in Ireland. This was published in Eurosurveillance, and they looked at 6 cases. So 6 kids that had COVID, they went to school, and they contact traced just over 1,100 of their contacts, and they found that there was no transmission to other children or adults within the school setting or other settings. There was religious ceremonies as well,
Yeah.
but they found that the only documented transmission was between the adults in a working environment outside of school. So but again, only 6 cases. That was in May. What do we have since then? So we go to North Carolina. There was a study that just recently came out looking at North Carolina schools, and it turns out some of them did stay open. So they studied those schools and they studied those kids and the transmissions there. And it's called Incidence and Secondary Transmission of SARS-CoV-2 Infection in Schools. So looking at this was their methods. From August 15th to October 23rd, 2020, 11 of the 56 school districts participating in ABCs were open for in-person instruction for all 9 weeks of the first quarter and agreed to track incidences and secondary transmission of SARS-CoV-2. Local health department staff adjudicated secondary transmission. Superintendents met weekly with ABC faculty to share lessons learned and develop prevention methods. So it's pretty in-depth process. And let's look at the results. Here we go. The results: over 9 weeks, 11 participating school districts had more than 90,000 students and staff attend school in person. Of these, there were 773 community-acquired SARS-CoV-2 infections documented by molecular testing. Through contact tracing, North Carolina Health Department staff determined an additional 32 infections were acquired within schools. No instances of child-to-adult transmission of SARS-CoV-2 were reported within schools. So just to recap, 773 in the community, 32 in the school. So
Wow.
we have widespread community transmission here and
90,000
extremely
students.
limited.
Amazing.
Right.
And the teachers all did fine. No adults caught it, which is that sort of backs up other studies we've been showing over the last several months. I think this is all huge breaking news. And again, I think every week we do the Highwire, I always feel like that should be it. That should be the end of lockdowns. Get the masks off. They're only doing worse. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, right? Is we are not we've got no way to, prove that lockdowns are the reason we are still seeing spikes, but you sure would love to go back in time and say, hey, let's try a different approach like the approach we used since the dawn of man until this year, where we let the virus just run its course. We protected the elderly, kept them in facilities and took care of them for the few weeks while everybody else caught the cold and it went away. This time we stopped it from running through the population, or made an attempt to, and it seems to me that you can't fool Mother Nature, right? You can't hide from a virus. It's going to make its rounds no matter what. But these are huge studies, right? And of course, I've gotten into trouble talking about masks, and I've said before, I'm not going to let masks be the hill that I die on. But honestly, ever since I took my son and had him on this stage with me, and we put masks on and put a CO2 monitor in there and saw the levels of CO2 that they're breathing, it's really hard to let it go. And so then when you see those great numbers, higher infections in places where they have masks, it is so clear that this is the biggest disaster in science history. These morons, I have to say it, I think Tony Fauci's a moron. I think that Tedros at the WHO is a moron. I'm just going to say it, and because we've been following their rules and not the Scott Atlases and the Guptas and the Bhaktis and the world-renowned scientists that have been so clear there is a better way forward. Hopefully, maybe Cuomo is signaling he's going to finally take their advice and move us in that direction. Thanks so much for that report, Jeffrey. Awesome information.
All right. Thank you, Del.
All right. Take care. We talk a lot about America because, our show is based here, but so many people around the world are being affected the same way that we are in other ways. And some countries seem to be maybe a step in front of us. I always say it's like looking at, the ghost of Christmas future. When we look at the UK, there's been tons. We've been showing you all the marches that are going on, and these cops walking in and striking people, with batons and arresting people. But what I think, there were some really shocking videos, and one of them really was there was an activist that just decided to take a camera inside of a hospital. Take a look at this.
Here I am, I'm outside Gloucester Royal Hospital just to show you how dead it is. Ghost town, never seen it so quiet. Where's the second wave? Where's all the people dying from the second wave, hey? Where are they? Share this, folks, this is proof. We've just been locked down in Gloucestershire into Tier 3 for this, for an empty hospital. Look at it. This is a disgrace. I've never seen, oh my God, look at this. It is so dead. All the people in our country desperately waiting for treatment, cancer treatment, heart disease. Look at this. Honestly, this is making me so angry walking around here. This is making me angry.
There's been a lot of fact checkers that have looked at that video, and in the UK they're trying to say, well, she wasn't in the ER, or, that wasn't one of the hospitals where they're really focusing on COVID. Lots of different excuses. Like I said, lots of excuses going on, but I don't really want to focus on that. We've had videos like that here, but what I want to focus on was the reaction to that video. All she did, she walked through a hospital and shot her camera. Look at what happens to her a couple of days later.
You're hurting my hands. Okay. Let them go.
You've got plenty of room, haven't they?
You're treating me like a criminal. I'm not a criminal. Will you take these handcuffs off?
Listen.
Deb,
can you ask him to put some clothes on underneath?
Go and put some clothes on and we'll get his custody,
What sort
okay?
of society is this when you come into a woman's house outside her bedroom door and intimidate her with no clothing on?
This is your last chance.
What sort of society is
Go
this?
put some clothes on for me, please, alright?
Look at you, you're behaving like a Nazi. Look at you. Look at yourself.
Right.
Look at yourself.
Deb, don't push him anymore. Just
Keep your hands down to your side
And
for
do
me,
not
please.
stand outside my bedroom door.
Go and get dressed for me,
Wait
please,
down
Debbie.
there
No, I'll
in
wait
my
here.
house.
I'll wait here for
Wait
you, please.
down there.
Deb, put some clothes on, otherwise you're going to go like that.
You're not.
Deb,
You should not stand
I'm not
outside a
going to give you
woman's.
another opportunity. Go and get dressed for me,
Do
please.
not come
I'm
near
trying to
my
be polite.
bedroom.
I'm not
Do
going to
not
come
come
into
near
your
my
bedroom.
bedroom.
I'm not going.
Wow, big time bust there. Really got a hardened criminal on your hands. She's just asking, can I put on some clothes? Obviously, they came through her front door, made it up outside of her bedroom. Headlines did say Deborah Hicks was arrested at that moment. British activist Debbie Hicks arrested after filming inside empty hospital. This is a disgrace. I do think it's a disgrace. Anti-lockdown activist arrested in her dressing gown after filming empty hospital ward. I don't understand what law she broke. I don't understand, but I don't live in the UK. I guess you're not allowed to go through and shoot video of the obvious. or have any opinion. And this is, again, this is censorship, right? This is what we're dealing with here in America. But if, you can't shoot, in an empty hospital, what about, are you allowed to drink a cup of coffee outdoors? No, apparently not. Take a look at this happening in the UK, on a beach.
At the moment, you're allowed out for exercise once a day, okay? For a period of time, okay? You've been filmed today in the town centre and around here and walking up and down the thing. That's not one exercise.
And I was sat on a bench having a cup of coffee. That is not antisocial. Well, because yes, you're provoking me. You are. You literally are. Are you going to give us your details or not? No. It's not attacking I was sitting on a bench. What the hell are you doing to this woman? You are breaking your own laws. This is disgusting. What are you doing? What's this poor woman doing? I was sitting on a bench. Why is her hands behind her back? You've got to choose your side. Why are her hands behind her back? Sorry. No, you're not going to arrest me for having a coffin. This is disgusting, guys.
Arrested for drinking cups of coffee, and as far as I can tell, the only social distancing rules being broken on that empty boardwalk is the police officers, the amount of police officers it takes to arrest a middle-aged woman that's having a coffee out in the open air. It's absolutely outrageous. It's outrageous to watch it from here. It's disgusting. We have seen this happening in Canada, around the world. Not as many videos of things like that quite yet in America, but I want you all to be aware. Is this the direction we're heading? Well, obviously, I'm not the only one that thinks it's disgusting. There are plenty of people. But what about in government? There is one guy that has been fantastic, eloquent, and so brilliant in discussing the frustrations of how the UK has been handling this. Take a look at what I think should be our hero of the week. Here you go.
The Secretary of State has told us this week that the average number of deaths is consistent with the long-term average for this time of year. 1,600 people die every day. But COVID is by no means chief amongst their killers. And it's no good to say that, well, every other jurisdiction in the world is following basically the same policy. That would strike me as herd stupidity. I believe that the government's policy has been disproportionate. By decree, it has interfered in our private lives and our family lives, telling who we may meet, when we may meet them, and what we must wear when we meet them. We have the cruelty of elderly people in care homes, disoriented, being unable to see the faces of their loved ones and to receive a hug. If we do not change the way we respond to this disease, in years to come, historians will pick over how it was a prosperous society entered into such a devastating act of self-harm.
It is my absolute honor and pleasure to be inviting Sir Desmond Sweeney to the Highwire right now. Sir Desmond, we've been watching these videos over the last several months. Sometimes you just appear to be that voice crying out in the wilderness. Do you feel all alone in the House of Parliament, or are you supported by others that are having trouble with how your government appears to be handling this issue?
No, there are lots of us, and some are as vocal as I am. I seem to have sort of hit the right spot, but there are others saying the same thing. Clearly, the government has a huge majority, particularly given that the opposition party itself is pursuing the same policy, indeed would do it even more forcefully. So they're able to get its way, but there is a significant and growing voice of dissent. Egged on by the scenes that you've just shown us, these shocking scenes. We're supposed to live in a democracy. Democracy means more than simply government by the majority. It means freedom of association. It means freedom of worship. It means freedom of expression and freedom to do all sorts of things. And what really shocked me about the scenes that you showed me was the police clearly giving quite false information to the people about the offences they were alleged to have committed. I heard the policeman in your shot saying you're only allowed out once a day to do exercise. Absolute nonsense. There is no such law. You can go out as many times a day as you like. You could exercise all day. Of course, the government advice is that you should go out once a day for exercise. It is not the job of the police to implement government advice. It is the job of the police to enforce the law, and there is no such law. When the police start implementing government advice or guidance, that's the moment you become a police state, a tyranny.
Are you concerned that when you look at this, you guys keep locking down? In fact, my understanding is you're locked down again, even though we've seen the death rate plummet. You mentioned it yourself. This has always had a death rate below 1%, but it appears that we're either treating this better or maybe the virus itself is weakening in its ability to, be extremely harmful, that small group of people. Yet you continue to lock down. In your mind, is there a lack of understanding about the science, or why is it that, we're having the same problem here in America, but as a politician deeply involved in this, what is going on? What do you think is really behind this? Is there some other desire to control the people that has nothing to do with health? Where are you at with that?
There are aspects of this which I'm certain come down to social control, like the wearing of masks, isn't it? The medical case, you've just rubbished it earlier this evening on the wearing of masks, but that's there for social control. I'm certain there are all sorts of people that have hidden agendas behind this, but not the people in power. The government, I think the principal problem the government has is a scientific orthodoxy, which they are ill-equipped to challenge. The basic purpose of the lockdown in the United Kingdom is to stop the healthcare system from being overwhelmed by too many hospital admissions. That is what we're attempting to do. Now, clearly, it's an absolute failure because all lockdowns do is simply push the infections further down the road. You close down all social activity, human interaction, the infection rate falls. You relax it because it's fallen, and hey presto, the rate of infection goes up again. Hospital admissions start to rise, so you have another lockdown, and so proceeding. So we're on what, fourth or fifth iteration of this disastrous failing policy. But the problem for the government is when you've got eminent scientists suddenly arriving and saying, oh, we've just discovered this new variant, and look at our model, and thousands of people are going to die if you don't do what we say, and you'll be to blame. And the government, unable to access some equally eminent source of counter advice, or at least arm itself with the right questions to ask those scientific advisors, is bounced into yet another lockdown for the fear of the consequences. What the government needs here is a source, particularly of mathematicians and statisticians and actuaries, who will be at least able to arm the government with the right questions to ask when the scientists arrive with their model saying that everyone's going to die unless you have another lockdown, and you'll be to blame. And that is our problem in this country. So wherever there may be other agendas behind this, I think the government is just attempting to do the best thing, attempting to save lives, attempting to reduce hospital admissions, but it lacks credible scientific methodology to be able to question the orthodoxy that's being presented to it. And in all this, the most fundamental problem is that whilst we're doing this in order to prevent hospital admission flowing, overwhelming the healthcare system, You know, this comes at an enormous economic and social cost, which will last for decades as slow growth results from zombie firms unable to take on new markets, new enterprises because they're loaded with debt. Devastating consequences for our children, their schooling and their mental health. It's catastrophic.
I mean, it could almost be likened to chopping off your leg to deal with athlete's foot. I mean, at a certain point, I think there's a giant overstep that clearly is going to have repercussions that will probably be even more deadly than the illness that we were trying to deal with. You know, I know you're busy. I don't want to take up much more of your time, but I really want to thank you for being a voice of reason. There are, you know, you have clones, I know, in different parliaments and government systems around the world that are asking the right questions. Are you aware, though, that there are brilliant scientists that have signed on to this great Barrington Declaration, many of them your own from Oxford and different universities in England, that would love to be on that panel, would love to be speaking on behalf of the other perspective, the balance to the one perspective that has come from some of your worst scientists. When we think about the imperial model and the work that has been so completely flawed, yet we seem to keep going, you seem to keep going back to Neil Ferguson in England when you have far better scientists that have been more accurate about this from the beginning. I question, are there politicians that are blocking some sort of panel that can represent the opposite side of this coin?
I can only describe it as a form of mass hysteria. And the government has been swept into this as well. And a lack of a sense of proportion to step back and examine the science properly.
Mm. Yeah, it is hysteria, right? You would think that people in politics would have learned to never let their hair catch on fire, that is not the best way to handle a situation. Well, you seem to have it together. I really want to thank you for taking the time. We will continue to check in with you. You have a really popular Twitter. How do we follow these great speeches that you are giving in the floor of Parliament? What's the best way to see what you're up to?
Well, either Twitter or Facebook. Or you can log on to the parliamentary website, but then you've got to use their search engine. It's not the most user friendly. But the problem with Twitter is you only get 2 minutes.
It's
So it's
for
better
me
on
too.
better on Facebook if you want to see. But most of my speeches are short. They are short, but 2 minutes is very, very short. So the 2-minute ones can be edited by my researcher. But if you go to the Facebook, you see them in their full glory.
I'm assuming that's at Sir Desmond Sweeney. Is that where we find you there?
Yeah, it's Desmond Swain at Twitter.
Okay.
Or is it Desmond.Swain at Twitter? Something like that. But
we'll figure it out.
Just Google Desmond Swain.
If
Twitter.
Google still works. Thank you so much, Sir Desmond. Thank you for taking the time and keep up the brilliant work. I think you're a beacon of light, and I hope that light shines brighter and brighter and affects more and more people. Take care.
Thanks very much.
Man, I love that guy. I mean, that is, I mean, if you haven't, go seriously, check out his Twitter, check out his Facebook page, because it's absolutely phenomenal. Look, there's no other show like this, right? There's no other show. You're not seeing this on the news. You're not seeing about studies about masks, that it's a disaster where they looked at 30,000 children. There's so many things. Every time you tune in, every Thursday to the Highwire, you know that it's a place you're going to find truth. And again, if you've signed our newsletter on Monday, you're going to get a newsletter that will allow you and give you links to all of the studies, all the science, all of the videos that we've covered, because we are a totally transparent news organization. Try that on CNN. Try that on MSNBC. Why don't you hand the people that are watching your show proof of what you're saying? Who else does that? Nobody else does. So in order to support that work, and so that we can keep getting guests like the ones we're bringing you from around the world, we need your support. This year more than ever, we talked about the legal cases. We have a huge announcement that should be coming by Monday. We're very excited about. So if you're on the newsletter, you'll be one of the first to hear it from our legal team. But we are winning when it comes to information. We're winning when when it comes to our legal cases, but all of that is only made possible if you help us out. So please, if you haven't already, why don't you go to ICanDecide.org and become a recurring donor. Think of it like a subscription, like your Netflix or any of the other, platforms that you spend a fortune on that lie to you all the time. Why don't you help us out and give us $21 for 2021. $21 would make a huge difference. And for those of you that were so gracious to give us $20 in 2020, if you can skip perhaps a sugar cube in your coffee once a month, why don't you up that to $21? That'll make a huge difference. All of this is only possible because of you. I mean it. I've worked at CBS. Many of the people that put this show together, we had a dream. What could we do with the news if we didn't have to answer to sponsors? Well, you're looking at it. You've made it possible. I want to thank everybody that over the last year has really expanded our ability to hire new reporters around the world and international lawyers. So it's really incredible. All right, so, one of the things that I do is I check in with scientists that we've talked to. Some of them are behind the scenes. Others decide to come forward at different times, but with questions. What would the questions be when it comes to the coronavirus vaccine? There are obvious questions that they're already admitting that they haven't answered. Things like what a vaccine does, which is stop transmission. They don't know if it does. I don't even know how this thing can be called a vaccination until it proves that it can stop the infection and stop transmission. But science doesn't seem to be working the way it used to, where we were asked hard questions, where we challenged the theory, where, actually checked in with, I don't know, maybe heart doctors and neuroscientists to figure out what they thought. Well, we've done a lot of reporting on the immune system and the potential for autoimmune issues when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine. We've discussed, fertility with scientists and doctors that can discuss that issue. But I was talking to a neuroscientist that has done some work in this field that brought us a lot of the studies on the dangers of aluminum in vaccines. Of course, I'm talking about the world-renowned scientist from the University of British Columbia, Dr. Christopher Shaw, and it is my honor and pleasure to have him joining us right now on the Highwire. Chris, you brought up something. I sort of just stopped you the other day and said, you know what, I want you to bring that live on the Highwire. From a perspective of neuroscience, there's lots of concerns that causing the cell to create a spike protein in the body and hoping that the immune system somehow creates antibodies to fight that could start some cycle that could lead to long-term autoimmune illness. Now, of course, there's excuses, but not a lot of science has been done. But you have a particular concern when it comes to the brain. What is that concern?
Well, the concern is actually several-fold. One, I looked at the Pfizer and the Moderna phase 3 safety studies, and there were things that were disturbing in that. One of the biggest ones that I noticed was the Bell's palsy, and then I went back through the animal literature where some Moderna scientists had actually looked at where the construct, the mRNA lipid-coated polyethylene glycol construct had gone. And they were finding it in all kinds of parts of the body. And the official story is that once you inject it into your muscle, it stays there. It gets into your cells, and the lipid helps you do that. And then it attaches to the ribosomes, and it turns out this protein that your immune system will recognize, and all is good to go. The problem is in their own study. This is done in 2012. The first author is a guy named Kapil Bal. And what you see when you go to their table 2 is it looks like the construct, and this was done with a different virus. But it was the test of the mRNA vaccine in general. And as with the Pfizer and the Moderna stuff that came out with humans, they're getting pretty good immune response initially, it looks like.
Yep.
But they're also finding the construct in the brain and other places. So that tells us something that it's not breaking down as fast as it's supposed to. Remember, the whole basis of the cold chain storage is that this is a very labile molecule, that it will not survive. And somehow it is surviving to get inside various organs, including the brain. And that table tells you that this is maybe something we need to worry about, and we need to study in more detail, not just launch a population of 7 billion people, because I think you're inevitably going to have some consequences that we don't understand. So why is it there? I mean, it's not much compared to how much is in the muscle, but there shouldn't be any. So why is it there?
I want to bring up that really quickly because obviously this looks like these were animal models, correct? And so they're able to kill the models after delivery of the technology, right? The mRNA technology.
That's right.
But folks, look at all the places they found it. It's like it blew up inside of the animal. We're talking bone marrow, brain, lymph nodes, heart, kidneys, liver, lungs. I mean, I guess if your goal was for it to travel all throughout the body, then mission accomplished. But what I guess my question is I've even seen doctors putting out videos that any concern that this crosses the blood-brain barrier are not true. It's been proven that that's not true. And for a layperson like myself, I ask myself, why are you even telling me that? I mean, first of all, what would be the problem if it does cross the blood-brain barrier? Why are they defending against that? So let me ask you that. What could be the possible problems should this mRNA technology make it into your brain?
Well, my first reaction would be that it could trigger some autoimmune reactions inside the brain, inflammation, because when you release either the protein, in this case it may be the mRNA itself, because it's inside the brain, you're going to trigger microglia, your resident immune cells, to do something about it. And what are they going to do? They're going to try and deal with the cells that are releasing it, or wherever it is. Maybe they'll just engulf it and it'll be harmless. But the onus is on the company to actually show us that it's not harmless. And they started to do that back in 2012 with the mice study. But I would think that a lot more rigorous science needs to be done about this before you do a giant experiment with 7 billion people. And you don't want to be coming back 2 years later or 3 years later and say, oh my goodness, where did all this autoimmunity come from? And I think it's a concern. And I think it really is incumbent upon the companies and NIH and CDC and all those entities that monitor the safety of these things actually to commission some studies and say, where does it go? Because clearly, based on Moderna's own data, it goes into various compartments of your body, including brain. Again, not much, but how much is safe? We don't know. And they never followed it over time. The animals are sacrificed after a few days after injection. So how much goes there eventually? Why is it going there at all? I mean, that doesn't make any sense based on what they're telling us about how easily degraded this molecule is. So it shouldn't be there. It is there according to their own data. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe they didn't do it right. But again, that calls for more studies, not fewer.
Absolutely. And so when you're saying autoimmune disease, leading to autoimmune disease in the brain, I always think of autoimmune disease sort of in the body. But you're saying that the glia cells up there that sort of handle immunity in the brain, when you say it could lead to inflammation, are you talking about is the potential for brain swelling? Is that something that could happen?
I don't know. I mean, again, I'm only going on this one study. There are a couple others that show somewhat the same thing. But when you turn your microglia loose against targets inside the brain, you're going to get inflammation of some sort, and it's going to start targeting cells. The other thing, as a neuroscientist, I work on neurodegenerative diseases, and what characterizes all of them, virtually all of them, is this misfolded protein that is usually characteristic to Lou Gehrig's disease, to Alzheimer's, to Parkinson's, to Huntington's. There are different proteins, but what they tend to do is they tend to form these unusual kinds of sheets of misfolded proteins called beta sheets. Now you're asking cells in various parts of the body, including possibly the brain, to make a lot of proteins and release it to the outside. Are we sure that's what it's all doing? Are you getting clusters of misfolded proteins inside neurons? That would be a bad thing to do. And you'd like to know where it is, how much of it there is, and which particular neuronal groups it's targeting. And those are the kind of questions I think you would easily have wanted the companies to solve long before they started using authorization and discovering some years later that they have a problem.
What would be your advice? How long does it take to answer? I've had different scientists that are asking different questions. We've talked about the placenta, the potential attack of if there's immunity to a spike protein that resembles, the lining of the placenta. But for your concern, if you were to say, hey, Pfizer calls you, Moderna calls you, or Anthony Fauci says, you are, good at designing studies of the brain, how long would it take you? How would you design figuring out if we have an issue of the mRNA vaccine entering the brain? What would be the process?
You would, if you were doing it in mice or monkeys, that's essentially a discussion of cost. If you were doing it in mice, like they did this mouse study, and remember, it was ridiculously underpowered. They only did 3 mice per group. but you would probably want to do adequately powered 10, 15 mice per group, however many groups you want. And then you would do detailed histology and biochemistry of all those regions of brain. You'd be looking at maybe a year's work, not much more than that. And so is it out of their budget? Probably not, with the billions of dollars they have. Could they easily do it? Sure, there are a lot of scientists who could do this. I'm not the only one. There are any numbers who could do this. And then you would have an idea, is this a problem or not? Because you'd not only do detailed analysis to see if there are changes that suggested impacts on particular brain regions, but you'd also be looking at the cellular level. You'd be looking at the biochemical level. And again, not hard. All those techniques take you maybe, I'd like to say, a year, totally, maybe not even that much. And then you would have a much better idea. And the fact that they're not doing it, well, that's typical. They rarely do histology on brains in animal models run by the corporations. But here, especially when you're rushing it out the door, I think you need to do it. And I think it's not that hard to do.
Well, Dr. Shaw, I want to thank you for bringing that perspective. I think that we should be asking you, I think everyone assumes that science and scientists and people that care about humanity, people like Bill Gates, fund great scientists like you to make sure we've answered questions before we put people in harm's way. Is it your opinion that we have jumped the gun here, that we have rushed the technology into people before it's ready?
Yes, that is my opinion. I think this is a vast experiment that should have been done in the laboratory with animal models, and now it's being done on people. And we'll know the answer. And I think you're going to show some video clips in a little bit. We'll know the answer in some months and years to come. But the potential is that you're going to harm a lot of people while you're doing this experiment on humans.
Amazing. Yeah, really shocking. All right, well, I'm glad you are continuing to do the great work you're doing, asking the questions of science that should be asked. I wanted to thank you for taking the time, Chris, and we'll look forward to seeing you again sometime in the future, especially if we start seeing some issue with the brain, right, in the people that are getting this.
Well, let's hope it's not. But again, let's hope that it's not as serious as it might be. But again, the only way to find out now is we're going to watch the results emerge as people get the shots and as they begin to be monitored in more detail.
All right.
But again, that should have been done a long time ago.
Absolutely.
My pleasure, Joe.
All right, take care. I mean, we keep bringing you world-renowned scientists that are all saying the same thing: too fast. Warp speed is not the way to go. Maybe warp speed for a tiny population of people, maybe that 0.26% that are really in an at-risk category, but you don't have regular people. You don't have healthy doctors and healthy nurses and healthy people across this country. And now they're going to start doing trials on children before they've done important trials on mice and monkeys. I'm sorry for those of you that, with PETA, that think that a monkey and a mouse is the same as a human being. I'll never forget, driving down the road and seeing a billboard that said that dogs are people too. Actually, not true. I remember just thinking, not true. I love my dog, I love animals, but they're not people. I'm sorry if I'm offending someone out there, but I don't like the idea that we're testing on innocent people as we speak. And what are the results? Let's look at just some of the headlines and tweets that we just started seeing last week. It's looking really bad, folks. Here we go. Unexpected string of allergic reaction causes delays at vaccination superstation near Petco Park. Mexican doctor hospitalized after receiving COVID-19 vaccine. The doctor, whose name has not been released, was admitted to the intensive care unit of a public hospital in the northern state of Nuevo Leon after she experienced seizures, difficulty breathing, and a skin rash. The initial diagnosis is encephalomyelitis. I think that has something to do with swelling, like we're talking about, the neurology in your body. Young man develops rare life-threatening syndrome after COVID-19 vaccine. Professor Dror Mevarak, director of the coronavirus department of Hadassah, tweeted on the matter, writing, "Rare life-threatening multi-system inflammatory syndrome following the vaccination. A 23-year-old social worker was identified at our department." And I want you to look at that. We've been describing to you, right, is what we've been calling a cytokine storm that we were seeing in the trials of these vaccines in animals for the last 20 years. Isn't that what's being described right there? A rare, life-threatening, total multi-system meltdown inflammatory syndrome? Horrifying. Maverick told Channel 12, "We found out that the young man had contracted the coronavirus asymptomatically before he was vaccinated. It may be accidental, but I would not underestimate it. Care must be taken in vaccination of people people who were sick with coronavirus in the past. And of course, as you know, they're telling us, don't worry if you've already had it. In fact, if you have had it, doesn't matter that now all the studies are showing that you have long-term immunity, longer than anything we can deliver with the vaccine. Get the vaccine anyway. Do we have a couple more headlines here? 75-year-old Israeli man dies 2 hours after getting COVID-19 vaccine. I wonder if it went to his brain. 88-year-old collapses and dies several hours after being vaccinated. 75-year-old Israeli woman found lifeless hours after second dose of COVID-19 vaccine. Of course, here we are seeing, right, that exact at-risk group that they are delivering this vaccine to, they just decided not to actually put in their trials. You see, this is the problem. The trials should have only really been on 65 and older with other comorbidities, since those are the only people that need this vaccine. I think there was one more headline there. 5 more. Swiss nursing home resident reportedly dies after getting COVID-19 vaccine. New York Post. Norway probes deaths of 2 nursing home residents who got Pfizer's COVID vaccine. Hamilton PSW say allergic reaction to COVID-19 vaccine led to fainting, seizures, and CPR. That's CBC. I mean, that's as big as it gets in Canada. New York Times, doctor's death after COVID vaccine is being investigated. Dr. Jerry L. Spickback, an expert on blood disorders at Johns Hopkins University, was not involved in Dr. Michael's care, said that based on Ms. Neckelman's description, I think it is a medical certainty that the vaccine was related. This is going to be very rare, hopefully, but it could happen again. This is what we are seeing in the headlines, folks, and I told you this would be one of the really strange and dark benefits to the warp speed rollout of this vaccine is, as I keep saying, now you cannot say that vaccines do not cause death and injury. It is a known fact. It's being reported in headlines all around the world, but nothing is more powerful than video, and of course, that's what made Vax, the film I made, so powerful. In the work that Polly Tommy, my co-producer, did with Vax.com. You can see all of the interviews with parents and real videos of people before and after vaccination. But this week, there were 2 videos that really struck me in a profound way. So sad, but I think if they're sharing these videos, that the Highwire, we want to be responsible to make sure that as many people get the warning they're trying to put out there. Take a look at this reaction to a vaccine that happened this week.
Bring the EKG machine to room 11. EKG machine to room 11.
Amazing. And of course, the trolls attacked and said she's faking that. Yeah, she's been practicing having spasms in her tongue for the last 2 years just for this moment. There's really sick people online that I guess just want to believe. Their belief is so deep, they will attack anybody that's obviously going through a very difficult situation. She posted on Facebook. This is a post that was up. Facebook took it down. It appears that now it's back up. Can you imagine cutting this video, censoring this? She's trying to talk to us and give us a message. Take a look at this.
My name is Sean Skelton, and I'm very real. And unfortunately, this is also very real. I didn't know what else to do other than to just come on live and show everybody what my body is going through at all wakening hours of my day. And I know I have a lot of support. But a lot of you people on Facebook are really mean. I didn't ask for this. And how do you just wake up one day and your whole world is wrong and it's upside down and no one helps you is beyond me. I can't make sense of it.
I mean, it's amazing. She has the records out there that she was vaccinated. Can you imagine attacking her? She's not an anti-vaxxer, clearly a pro-vaxxer that is now having to deal with the repercussions. And in case we're thinking maybe that's just an anomaly, there was another woman that put out a video with such a similar reaction. I just want to show this because it's really starting to remind many of us of something else. But take a look at this video. I mean, it's I'm speechless when you try to think of what you can say. My heart goes out to these women and all those that aren't brave enough to shoot video that are having this experience, I'm sure, around the world. But what was really shocking is I saw these posts, and there's more. We could do this all day long, unfortunately. But was sort of the statements in these posts, you know, saying things like, I've gone to, here we go, if you are considering the vaccine for COVID, the Moderna, I would advise against it. I'm in bad shape every day, getting worse, and I'm not getting help or answers. Why is she not getting help or answers? I'm scared to death, to say the least, and to find someone willing to attempt to figure this out. Hasn't been successful. I went to 2 hospitals today, walked out of Deaconess and went to St. Vincent. No answers there either. Doctors don't know what this is, folks. So, I mean, you know, slamming an EpiPen into you may fix anaphylaxis, but what is this? Right? And imagine now all of these doctors. Here's another one. My mom had a bad night last night, but today was a little better for her. They still don't know how to treat this problem. Well, that's exactly the problem when you have an experimental technology being injected into people that has never been tested for all of the myriad problems and the exact problems you were seeing in your animals: cytokine storms, immunopathologies, issues. This isn't surprising us. This is what happens when you didn't figure out to fix the problems you were seeing in the animal models for 20 years. Well, while mainstream medicine is going to sit there scratching its head, not knowing what to do because there's no aluminum to be removed. And remember, all of these doctors up until this year believe that vaccines are just safe and effective. That anybody saying that it injures people, well, that's a lie. You know what that means? None of them have ever studied how to heal a vaccine injury. They never believed. They've been bowing down to the pulpit of pharma and just believing every word of it. So none of these doctors that are giving you this vaccine have any understanding of what to do for you. But today I want to bring in a doctor that has spent his, life's work really trying to help people injured by vaccines and maybe get a perspective from somebody that would know where to start looking. I'm being joined by world-renowned immune therapist, I guess you could call it, or doctor of reality. Of course, I'm talking about Dr. James Neuenschwander. Dr. New, these videos are horrifying. And they remind me when I was traveling with Vaxxed of many of the images of the girls that were receiving the Gardasil vaccine. You know, this twitching, the body shimmering, some sort of convulsion or spasms in the muscles. Many of these girls, of course, this was the huge reaction to hundreds of girls in the same town, and being told that they were crazy, right? That this was a psychosomatic illness is how they ended up explaining the Gardasil phenomenon. You, of course, have treated, teenagers that have had to deal with that. Do you see a similarity when you see these videos of what's happening with this mRNA vaccine?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on again. It's a pleasure to be here. But, these videos are heartbreaking. And the first time I saw that video, that's the first thing I thought about is it looks like these 13, 14-year-old girls that were getting Gardasil. Because what you want to know from a neurologic point of view, the 3 videos that you showed were sort of 3 different types of brain injury. One was myoclonus. That's the tongue video, spasm of the tongue there, that's myoclonus. The middle one was more of a movement disorder, more of a chorea kind of thing. And that's the one that we were seeing a lot of with Gardasil. And then the third one is more of a dystonia where you have these spasms and sometimes people can get rigid. And you'll see all 3 types of injuries with vaccines because it depends on what part of the brain is being targeted. Now, previously, and with Gardasil, the belief was this was aluminum-induced inflammation or autoimmunity, right? So the COVID vaccine doesn't have aluminum in it, but as we just heard from Dr. Shaw, which, by the way, thank you for putting him on in front of me. It makes me look really stupid. Every time I listen to him, I think, I don't know anything. But
we know that's
really
not true. I'd love
it.
to actually see the 2 of you guys in the same room, but I appreciate the humility.
Oh yeah, we've had conversations. So if you look at the fact that this vaccine all by itself, without an adjuvant, produces this huge immune response, it's no shocker that you're going to get some sort of neurologic injury with this vaccine as well. I mean, it's happened with a bunch of these other vaccines. It makes sense that it would happen with this one as well. You know, the big thing we were worried about from the get-go, it is you inject mRNA into somebody. RNA is a danger signal. When Dr. Shaw was talking about that misfolded protein response, it's not just proteins. You also get damaged lipids. That's what our brain is made out of. And we call that the cell danger response. And nothing sets off the cell danger response like RNA and DNA. Those are two huge, huge danger signals. They really should never be outside of a cell. And so when they're floating around the blood, yeah, it's going to set off that kind of response. And there's no telling what's going to happen after that.
You know, and I see all of these people having injuries, you know, really actually reaching out to some of these vaccine risk groups now, people that they may have even once sort of been mean to, now saying, okay, I'm listening, where do I go, what do I do? No one in mainstream medicine is able to do anything for me. And I remember, I've been thinking as I read it, you know, there's no aluminum there to try and chelate out, or mercury, or the things that I've sort of heard about as being a lot of the work that, you know, doctors like yourself try to sort of, you know, clear, you know, the toxins out of the body. When you look at this, there's no aluminum. We have a fatty lipid. We have this PEG that looks like it might be problematic. Do you have thoughts on where you might start? You know, I'm sure you're going to start seeing some of these patients. What is it that you think may need to happen in the body?
Well, first and foremost, there are tests you can do because of the time this is you generate. I mean, you can generate brain inflammation, and brain inflammation can cause dysfunction just because you've activated these microglial cells, and you know you're not making connections. Things aren't talking to each other the way they should. But a lot of times, what I see in my practice, and this is particularly true of the kids on the autism spectrum, and some of these girls who got Gardasil, is you will actually generate autoimmune antibodies to the brain. And then it's a matter of what is that antibody directed against? Is it directed against a dopamine receptor? Because then you'll get certain herky-jerky tick-like movements like Tourette's. If it's directed against the NMDA, it's part of a glutamate receptor, you can get psychosis, you can get schizophrenia, you can get some of these weird chorea type movement disorders. If it's directed against GABA, you can get rigidity. And if it's directed against the basal ganglia in the center of your brain, you get this dystonia type stuff. So, you know, a lot of it gets back to the question of how do you deal with autoimmunity? Step one is, yeah, detoxify. So if there's aluminum, you want to try and get rid of the aluminum because that's continuing to irritate the brain if it's in there. But you have to go back and how do you calm down the immune system? And that's an entire, you know, lifetime of education on how to do that. But you're getting back into the basics of take care of the digestive tract, take care of the gut. Most of our immune function is governed by that. Get rid of other things that might be irritating the immune system. There's a lot you can do, but you can measure those autoimmune antibodies in the blood. So there are certain specialty labs that we use to try and determine, is that the problem? You know, and unfortunately, I know Mayo has a set of those types of antibodies that they run. We use a specialty lab, but you can actually try and identify these things. Now, I don't know if you're going to see those antibodies, you know, 4 or 5 days after onset. You got to remember that middle video you showed with the lady that sort of had the chorea type of movements. You know, she's a CRNA. She's a nurse. And she's been a nurse for 21 years, and they started labeling that as, oh, this is a conversion disorder, or, you know, this happened with H1N1 too, and they called it psychogenic movement disorder, all right, implying that it was some sort of psychological problem and not really a neurologic problem. But, you know, we know that those types of things can happen if somebody has some major trauma, you know, they're in a battlefield or something like that. Yeah, I could see a conversion disorder there. But this woman was saying she was minding her own business and got her vaccine and, you know, had a fever and a little bit of diarrhea. And then afterwards, these symptoms developed. And this is a nurse. She knows. You know, she
How long?
knows that
How
this is
long?
an injury from the vaccine.
You know, and you and I have talked. This vaccine is being rushed onto the market. We are now seeing injury in headlines. We've never seen that before. I mean, at least not for a good 10 years. Perhaps Katie Couric and back some time ago was the last one to really be assaulted for daring to question the safety of vaccines when she discussed Gardasil. But now we are seeing headlines everywhere. Clearly, the pharmaceutical industry, Pfizer and Moderna, they're trying to write these things off. They've got an excuse. They've got an excuse machine that is cranking. I think they need some nitrous in it. The smoke is coming out the top. Do you think they're going to get away with it? I mean, I really feel like people are just all over the internet, no matter how they try to shut this down. How do you can say one of these anomalies, but you see another woman and another woman. There's so many of these cases, yet they keep trying to say, well, it's coincidental. Do you think they're going to get away with it? Or do you think we are turning a corner into the recognition that at least for some people, vaccination really doesn't work? And many of these people, I'm sure, have gotten all the other vaccines. They're pro-vaccine people. This triggered them. What do you think this is going to do? Are they going to get away with it?
Well, whether or not they're going to get away with it is not going to have anything to do with how much of this gets out. Because I think, we talk about, VAERS trying to track vaccine injuries, and that's a terrible system. Facebook has become the new VAERS. Everybody's posting their injuries on Facebook.
Right.
Too bad it's not a searchable database, but, we're starting to see this stuff. So now we have 2 cases of idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. That's what that doctor died of in Florida. Basically wiped out his platelets. That's a definite autoimmune disorder, no question about that. Wiped out his platelets, and then he ended up dying of a brain bleed. There's another report on Facebook of a woman who got the vaccine and developed ITP afterwards. That's the same process. It's just targeting platelets instead of targeting the brain. So depending on what system you're targeting, all this stuff is probably autoimmune. And, who knows? I mean, these people could have had low levels of these antibodies, as it were, from either from previous vaccines or from toxin exposure, from genetic predisposition or whatever it was. They could have had these at a low level that was not clinical. It did not cause them any symptoms. And then you come in with this sledgehammer called the COVID-19 vaccine, and you beat the crap out of the immune system. It flares up, and whatever predisposed antibodies they have there all of a sudden rise to a level where now they're going to have clinical symptoms as a result of it. So if those antibodies were against platelets, then all of a sudden you're going to develop ITP and have a 0 platelet count. If the antibodies were against one of these brain receptors, you're going to get these weird movement disorders. But it's, again, it could be that. It could be that the vaccine did it all by itself. But for the vaccine to do it all by itself, to have these symptoms within 4 or 5 days, that would be very rapid. So you would assume there probably was some pre-existing condition. So, again, are they going to get away with it? I don't know. The more we promote this stuff, the more we broadcast this stuff, the more we get the information out, the more people understand, yes, there are people that get injured by vaccines. It happens, and it's not 1 in a million.
Right. Right, there is not, and this is the problem with one size fits all. How many people have underlying allergies? They've been saying don't give the vaccine to people with allergies because of anaphylaxis. Most people don't know they have an allergy. They're getting sick all the time, but they haven't narrowed it down to eggs or whatever the heck it is. Or you have a predisposition you don't know about. You have an autoimmunity. You have antibodies. I mean, all of these things is why you do trials for like 5 years, 10 years, or with a technology like this, how about 20 or 50 years? I'd like to see 2 generations born, or at least a generation after, to give birth after the mothers have received this vaccine, to see are we having any long-term issues with the genes and the DNA. But Dr. Neuenschwander, I'm so psyched that you're a part of our team and you're out there and you're looking into this, and I'm sure you're going to be one of the people that's going to attempt to start treating these people. I am very concerned that what we're talking about is just a message being sent to the cells and they are now interacting with it. If that message is what's doing this, it's like you're in a whole other world now. Maybe in some ways we're hoping it's the fatty lipid, right? It's the PEG, that it's just an allergic reaction. It seems to me we could figure out maybe how to deal with that. But what if it's just the message? What if it's just simply when your cells start making viral proteins because of a blueprint sent by a computer at Moderna? I mean, we're in a whole other world now. And as they've said, it's really more like a program. It's more like a technology or a computer system. Well, you're going to have your hands full, Dr. New, trying to figure out the way through, but I'm glad you're out there. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much, Del.
All right, take care. Well, as you know, that we put out a website to help people that are being injured, whether it's fill out a VAERS report or understand the symptoms. And maybe if we collect enough, we'll start seeing some patterns that we can provide to scientists that may understand what's going on, whether it's Dr. New or, other scientists like Christopher Shaw and many that you've seen here. We want to help. That's what our nonprofit is all about, the Informed Consent Action Network. For those of you who didn't see it last week, we are launching a new website to capture those injured by the coronavirus vaccine. Take a look at this.
If you or a loved one has been injured after receiving a COVID-19 vaccine, including if you are a participant in a clinical trial, go to injuredbycovidvaccine.com. Submissions are confidential. We are here to help provide support, including connecting with medical specialists and potentially securing legal representation. To assure the safety of COVID-19 vaccines for everyone, it is imperative that every person injured by this product report their injury. We can provide assistance completing a report to the CDC's Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. So, if you or a loved one has suffered an injury from a COVID-19 vaccine, go to injuredbycovidvaccine.com now.
Well, that blew up last week. We have so many reports. It's actually shocking to us, but I'm not going to talk about that. That is a totally private site. All of that information will be kept completely private. I don't even see much of it. It's going straight to our legal department and disseminating out to the information, the conversations happening there. But we're happy to be providing that support, even if it's just to get this correctly. These injuries, reported to VAERS in a correct way so that good data can be done by good scientists. I believe they're out there. I know there's good scientists. I know there's a lot of doctors. We know 50% of doctors are turning this down. There's good scientists, I'm sure, inside the CDC and the FDA that are not going along with this. So I've got to hold out hope. I always have hope. I have hope because I believe the truth does prevail. And I think that we are watching one of the biggest scientific disasters of all times. I get no joy out of that. I told you so, but hopefully we can bring this to a close as quickly as possible. Hopefully people wake up fast enough. But I saw a headline, I actually saw a picture that I think really represented what we have to do here. And so there's so much that you can do. I just don't want you to feel defeated. You can, get on board and help. When you fund ICANN, when you simply become a recurring donor, think of the people you can save just because of that website we've created, where we're going to get them some legal discussions, maybe put them in touch with people like New and Schwander that might be able to try and understand what's going on. We're going to get them set up with VAERS. You make that possible. And the legal cases we're winning, you make that possible. You should feel good. I think everybody that's been donated to ICANN over the last year and is going to start today, you can't imagine how it feels in a world where we feel like nothing is happening, where nobody cares, and it just seems so insurmountable. Those that have been making this possible, I think every Thursday get a little hit, and every Monday when they get that newsletter, you say, you know what? I'm actually making a difference in this world. You know what makes a difference? Standing up. I keep thinking about Scott Atlas's tweet over a month ago when he says, you need to rise up. You get what you accept. I saw this picture and I think it perfectly illustrated that. This was out of Italy. When you look at that headline, let's go ahead and translate that. This is what they are announcing in Italy: the triumph of civil disobedience. Bars and restaurants on the counter, 30,000 reopening. You break the government. They've done it in Italy. 30,000 restaurants and bars in Italy said, screw you, screw your lockdown, screw your mandate. We are opening up, and it broke the system. People must. This is our nation. And in every democracy and republic around the world, I'm speaking to you, whether you're in Australia or the UK or Spain or Italy or France or Canada. You decide how we move forward, not these politicians that, as they were perfectly described by Sir Desmond, are in an absolute panic, running around with their hair on fire. Don't let those people make the decisions for you. Your Constitution requires that they listen to you. They will listen to us as we take our masks off. They will listen to us as we move in to our school council meetings and saying, here's the science. I'm taking the mask off my children, and we all are, because we're not going to make our kids sick. We're not going to make them angry. We're not going to make them depressed. We're not going to hurt their cognitive abilities any longer, especially since all this other science that the Highwire provided for us showed us that there's no need for the mask, because mask wearing is actually increasing the amount of infection around the United States of America. We're bringing you the truth, but what are you going to do with it? At least make it difficult. Practice a modicum of resistance. Try it on for size this week. Why don't you try doing what I do? At least walk everywhere you can without a mask until someone makes you wear it. Make someone have the gumption to walk up to you and say, sir or ma'am, you've got to put that mask on or we're kicking you out of this establishment or off of this plane. At least make them work for it. Make them have to hire extra people to deal with it. Because as we stand more and more in the truth, the scientific reality that exists on this planet, only we decide our future. Only we take these masks off. I guarantee you, no government is going to admit they were wrong. They're billions of dollars in, a year in. Can you imagine the lawsuits if these governments ever admitted what we have shown you from the beginning on the Highwire? That the science doesn't support any of these decisions? Can you imagine all the millions of people that have lost their jobs, their life's work, that are now homeless? 70,000 people are now homeless and because of the unemployment in the UK. 70,000 people who had jobs are now homeless. That was just one of the headlines we read last week. Do you actually think they're going to admit that that was their fault so that we can sue them? It's never going to happen. If you're waiting for that phone call to say, we were wrong, it's not coming. Tony Fauci's not going to admit it. Andrew Cuomo's not going to admit it. They are pot committed, folks. They are going to take this to their grave. The question is, will you let them take you to your grave? Wake up. Be a human being. Stand for your constitutional rights. I'm there with you, and more of us are standing together every day. If we want change, it starts with us. We'll keep reporting the truth so that you can share it with everyone you know. Please sign our newsletter and sign the newsletters of everybody that is bringing you good information. Don't let them take us down. We win this in the end. I can see the light. It's darkest before the light, but there's a little glimmer. Can you see it? Can you see the shimmer? It's happening. And for more light, I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the Highwire insiders who make this show possible. If you'd like to become a Highwire insider, then go to our website, thehighwire.com, and sign up now. And please, share the show. We're on Instagram, Twitter, BitChute, and now on Roku. Because knowledge is power, censorship is real, and we need all the help we can get.